Today on Rappler, police arrest jihad evangelist Musa Cerantonio in Cebu. President Benigno Aquino rejects the resignation of Budget Secretary Butch Abad. And Indonesia's Jokowi plans to end fuel subsidies in phases. Hello, I'm Paterno Esmaquel. Welcome to Rappler, your social news network. Cebu police arrest Australian jihad evangelist Musa Cerantonio Friday. Cerantonio is named as one of the top 2 most influential jihadist inspirations for fighters in Syria and Iraq. Police note Cerantonio as a, quote, a person of interest to the intel community. Police say Cerantonio did not resist arrest. He reportedly lifted his hands in surrender as SWAT team members broke one of the windows to his apartment. However, Cerantonio refuses to speak to the police. The 29-year-old Cerantonio is a Christian convert to Islam who uses social media effectively to encourage terrorism, urging Muslims to join the jihad in Syria and Iraq. Philippine and Australian sources earlier told Rappler that Cerantonio has been in the Philippines for nearly a year. He earlier tweeted he would join the Islamic State of Iraq in Syria, or ISIS, a terrorist group that traces its roots to Al-Qaeda in Iraq. In early June, ISIS militants began their march to capture Baghdad. Police Senior Superintendent Conrad Capa says Cerantonio was served a warrant for deportation dated July 10. Cerantonio is transferred to Manila Friday. How does candidate Jokowi plan to jumpstart the economy, as well as confront problems like traffic and fuel subsidies? Maria Ressa tells us more in this video blog.
Macet bangit. The traffic is bad. It's a phrase you hear a lot in Jakarta. Just 2 days ago, we were stuck for more than 6 hours in start and stop traffic like the one you see behind me. It's something you think about that is personally inconvenient, but the traffic has become so bad that it's now an issue of national concern. Part of the problem right now is that traffic in Jakarta alone is estimated to cost 0.6% of Indonesia's GDP. One of the reasons it's so bad is not just because of the infrastructure, the roads and highways, but also because gas is so cheap. A liter of fuel costs about 24 pesos, half what it costs in the Philippines, or about 50 US cents, far cheaper than what it is in the United States. The Indonesian government subsidizes fuel. About 27% of the 2014 budget goes to fuel subsidies. That is more than all of its capital expenditure, including what it spends on infrastructure. This is one of the biggest challenges for Indonesia's next leader.
Transportation and logistics are the big challenge for Indonesia. All the studies show that our lack of competitiveness is because of the infrastructure bottlenecks and the logistics bottlenecks.
Traffic.
Yeah, traffic and just getting people, getting goods to move efficiently and effectively and telecommunications even. Yeah, so these are the big challenges for the incoming government.
The man leading in the presidential quick count, Jokowi, says he plans to cut subsidies, but they're political costs, so he plans to do it in phases.
Part of the large portions of the subsidy goes to electric generating activities. So Indonesian's power plant is also using subsidized fuel.
Yes.
And that is an issue.
Yes.
And the idea is to convert that
Okay.
into coal-based
Yeah.
or natural gas
Yeah.
base instead of using fuel, and that will ease up the subsidy. We still need to retain subsidy to the low-income family.
Indonesia's 250 million people, the country with the world's largest Muslim population, is an economic linchpin for Southeast Asia. It's important that the next leader gets its policies right. That leader will be announced officially on July 22. Meantime, don't expect the traffic in Jakarta to get better anytime soon. Maria Ressa, Rappler, Jakarta.
The next president of Indonesia will face a host of challenges, both in the international arena and at home. Many Indonesians have a simple wish for their next leader not to forget the masses. Ay Makaraig files this video blog.
These are the street vendors of Jakarta. Some of them voted for Jakarta Governor Jokowi Widodo for president, while others went for former General Prabowo Subianto. But others did not vote. Despite the uncertainty about the election winner, these are simple people living simple lives, and they say they only have simple hopes from the next president.
Pak Jokowi supaya mimpin rakyat kecil ini bisa, bisa makmur dan semuanya bisa seterusnya itu aman, damai, hidup rakyat kecil dan semua orang Indonesia ini bisa hidup yang bahagia, hidup yang mulia gitu.
Ya harapannya gitu ke depannya, mudah-mudahan rakyat kecil kayak macam kita atau kita ekonomi lemah ke bawah, otomatis kan kita mengharapkan apa yang lebih murah ke depannya. Biaya hidup kita biar ringan, terus biaya anak sekolah juga bisa termasuk kita mampulah membiayai, atau biaya pendidikan juga biar lebih ringan dan jangan termasuk kita sebagai rakyat kecil terbebani cuman sebagai penonton atau termasuk isapan jempol. Kita pengen nyekolin anak nggak mampu karena kita penghasilannya kecil, biaya hidup kita berat atau apa mahal, dan biaya pendidikan mahal. Kalau bisa jangan begitulah.
These are the drivers of Jakarta's ubiquitous ojek or motorcycles. They say whoever wins as president, their lives will remain the same and they will still be ojek drivers. Despite many problems the next president of Indonesia will face in the economic, domestic, and international fronts, they say they hope their leader will not forget the problems of ordinary people like themselves, especially for a man who might just sit in the palace on the promise of representing the masses. Ayi Makaraig, Rappler, Jakarta.
As Indonesia waits to see whether Jakarta Governor Joko Widodo or Jokowi will be declared Indonesia's new president later this month, allies of his rival Prabowo Subianto are poised to take control of the legislature. The 6 political parties supporting Prabowo created a so-called permanent coalition in the House of Representatives or DPR Tuesday and passed amendments to the 2009 law on legislatures. Prior to the amendments in choosing the DPR's leadership, the position was automatically given to the party with the most number of seats. It will now be an elected post. Jokowi's Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle coalition is the minority in the new DPR, with only 4 parties. Prabowo's party, Gerindra, leads a faction of 6 parties, dominating 353 of the 560 seats in the legislature. Holding the majority, Gerindra has the numbers needed to choose the House leadership and possibly derail Jokowi's programs in case he is declared president. President Benigno Aquino rejects the resignation of Budget Secretary Butch Abad over the government's controversial spending program. There has been clamor for Abad to resign over the Disbursement Acceleration Program or DAP after the Supreme Court declared parts of the program unconstitutional. While the President is empowered to use the savings of any executive agency to fund other projects within that same agency, the DAP moved funds from one agency to another even before fiscal years were over, pulling out allocation from supposedly slow-moving funds. A senior Supreme Court justice pointed out the budget chief did this without the President's written approval. The government defends the DAP, saying it benefited Filipinos and helped boost the country's economy. Senator Juan Ponce Enrile refuses to enter a plea with the anti-graft court Sandigan Bayan in relation to the plunder case against him. He is the 3rd senator to do so in the biggest corruption case in the country's recent history. The Sandigan Bayan entered a not guilty plea for him. Enrile is accused of pocketing public money intended for development projects. Enrile's lawyers say the court has not acquired jurisdiction over the accused in these cases. The Enrile camp is challenging the sufficiency and validity of the charge sheets against him in the first place. Enrile's co-accused and former Chief of Staff Gigi Reyes skips her scheduled arraignment upon the doctor's advice. Reyes is transferred to the Philippine Heart Center Friday. Her attending doctor at the Taguig Pateros District Hospital, where she is currently confined, says Reyes suffers from hypertensive urgency and neurocirculatory asthenia. Located along the Pacific Ocean's Ring of Fire, the Philippines is vulnerable to earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and other geohazards as much as typhoon and floods. To improve the way critical information is communicated to the general public, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, or PHIVOLCS, and Rappler agreed to combine efforts via Project Agos. Project Agos is a platform that combines top-down government action and bottom-up civic engagement to help communities deal with climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. It harnesses technology to maximize the flow of critical data before, during, and after a disaster. PHIVOLCS agreed to share data on geohazards with Rappler for dissemination to the public via Project Agos. Project Agos is operated by MovePH, Rappler's civic engagement arm. A Myanmar court sentences 4 reporters and the chief executive of the Unity Weekly News to 10 years in prison with hard labor. The journalists are imprisoned after they reported the military is operating a chemical weapons factory under the instructions of former strongman junta chief Tan Shwe. The journalists were arrested in February, days after the article was published. Myanmar's military ruled the country with an iron fist for nearly 5 decades, imprisoning critics and journalists. A new quasi-civilian regime came to power in 2011 and instituted reforms that included freeing political prisoners and lifting censorship. But rights groups are concerned about press freedom after several cases of criminal prosecutions against journalists. The United States and China failed to resolve issues on cyber spying and maritime disputes after 2 days of high-stakes talks. The two countries met for the 6th annual Strategic and Economic Dialogue. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry hits China with what he describes as the, quote, chilling effect of internet hacking on U.S. businesses. Washington earlier indicted 5 Chinese military officers for hacking into U.S. companies. Chinese State Councilor Yang Jiechi says cybersecurity is a, quote, common threat and challenge facing all countries. Beijing also insists it is a victim of hacking. It accuses Washington of hypocrisy since it conducts sweeping surveillance around the world. The two sides also disagree on how to resolve tensions in the South and East China Seas, despite Washington's warnings that Beijing risks triggering conflict. Yang insists, quote, China is committed to upholding its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights. Despite differences in opinion, Kerry says the two sides agreed on achieving a, quote, denuclearized, stable, and prosperous Korean peninsula and fighting climate change. Football fan Pope Francis might watch the World Cup final between his native Argentina and Germany on Sunday, Monday morning in Manila. But the Vatican says it's unlikely he'll watch the game beside his German predecessor, Benedict XVI. Pope Francis is said to be a fan and card-carrying member of the San Lorenzo de Almagro Football Club since childhood. Benedict XVI, whose interest lies in classical piano, is not a football fan. Vatican officials say he has never sat through a football game in his life. But this hasn't stopped a few jokes from doing the rounds ahead of the big game in Brazil. Italy's Rai News made a photo montage with an image of the two popes kneeling side by side, except that each is depicted praying for his team. Conscious of his role as head of the Catholic Church, Francis has been careful not to make any predictions about the World Cup. But according to one news agency, Francis reportedly declined an offer from the Swiss Guards to watch the Argentina-Switzerland game, saying there would be a war. Let's now look at Rappler's Rap for today, a list of the 10 most important events around the world you shouldn't miss. At number 6, Germany expels the chief of the United States Secret Services station in Berlin after uncovering 2 cases of spying by the Americans. The discovery happened as public anger simmered following the allegations by fugitive Edward Snowden that the U.S. National Security Agency wiretapped the phone calls of German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And at number 9, the 2014 Emmy Awards nominees are announced, delighting TV fans and disappointing some. Popular series like Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, and House of Cards are nominated for Outstanding Drama Series, while The Good Wife was left out. For the full top 10, visit Rappler.com's-The-Rap. The newest performing arts collective in Manila, the Sandbox Collective, presents Danny Girl, a musical about a battle against cancer. Through the eyes of a child, the musical asks important questions about God, family, and the brutalities of disease. G. Tonji reports.
There's a new musical in town, one that's told from a young girl's perspective, that questions why cancer. 9-year-old Danny Girl is battling leukemia, but instead of giving up, she goes on a fantastical journey to find her hair. Danny Girl is an off-Broadway musical with book and lyrics by Christopher Diamond and music by Michael Kuman. Director Toph de Venetia tells us about the Sandbox Collective, the newest theater company in town, and why it's doing Danny Girl.
And if you cater or spoon feed, then what exactly are you adding to the conversation? If you replicate, then how are you progressing as not just as like a community, but also as a nation? So it's these things that we took into consideration, and the music's beautiful.
Theater actor Reba Tadero, who plays 14 characters in the musical, says the story strikes a chord in modern society. To him, Danny Girl is very personal.
It hits very close to home because I lost my grandmother to cancer. That was 13 years ago. That Danny being naive is actually what drives it even, further home. That when a child is experiencing this, how does she deal with it? Instead of thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna die, oh my God. No, she's looking for her hair. Because to a child, the first impulse is always, oh no, I'm not gonna get to play anymore. Instead of, to an adult, it's, oh, I'm gonna die. It's very, very different.
In the game of life, you have to know how to spin. In the game of life, you simply never give in. The musical explores universally salient themes such as life, in the face of death, and the power of a child's imagination. It's Danny Girl's positive perspective that will leave audiences with an uplifting experience at the theater. Danny Girl, a musical good for the soul. Jitanji, Rappler, Manila.
Every story in Rappler has a mood meter, which gives you 8 emotions to choose from. Click how you feel and your vote comes down to the Mood Navigator in the middle of the front page, which crowdsources the mood of the day. It also gives you the top 10 stories with the most clicks. It's a pretty negative day on our Mood Navigator today. We only have a few stories that stand out. This one, our top story right now, Australian ISIS supporter nabbed in Cebu, 87% happy. This other story about the World Cup, Vatican says no to popes. No to popes final for the World Cup, 92% amused. Most other stories on our Mood Navigator are red stories. This one, a story that broke in the afternoon, China hits the Philippines over extended oil drilling activities, 88% happy. And the story that got the most number of votes today, our top story in the morning, Aquino rejects Abad resignation, 47% angry. All these votes contributed to the mood of the day. Today, most people are angry. That's Rappler's newscast for today, Friday, July 11, 2014. Visit Rappler.com and watch our newscast Monday to Friday. Tell us how you feel on our mood meter and help us crowdsource the mood of the day. I'm Paterno S. Maquel. As we say at Rappler, tomorrow begins today.